Okay, hi everyone. My name's Matt Jones. I'm the Director of EduHealth Solutions, and I'm pleased to welcome you here to today's webinar on food and mood. I'm delighted to introduce Chloe and Jess from Health and Performance Collective, one of Australia's leading accredited practicing dietitians. The ladies have been involved in sports dietitian and performance nutrition for 20 years between them, helping a whole bunch of sports clubs, corporate food manufacturers, and other organisations with food and mood and related well-being. So we've partnered up with H&P to bring their knowledge to the time-pressured and often challenging schools sector. The intention today is for us to do a bit of a discussion and a presentation around the impact of diet on health and well-being. And this is largely targeted towards school operators. One of the things that's important to us at EduHealth is how our teachers, our staff and school leadership get as much health and wellbeing support as our kids are these days. Just in terms of housekeeping, we'll basically clock your questions along the way and raise them up at a Q&A session towards the end. So do feel free to ask questions as we're going. There are a few activities along the way as well. And without any further ado, I'll hand over to Chloe and Jess.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Matt, and a massive thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time out of your day to attend the presentation today. So I'm Chloe and this is Jess, and we are the co-founders of Health and Performance Collective, and very excited to talk to you today all about food and mood and how what you eat has a big impact on your mood. So I think we should get started.
We should. And as Chloe was saying, today is very much about the what and the why it's important and how it impacts, and giving you the background and a bit of the science, whereas the course we are going to talk about, or the challenge, is more than about the how and the implementation. So, I mean, why is this important? Of course, right now, mental health and mood is particularly front of mind for everybody, but did you know that almost half of Australians will experience a mental health problem, and nearly all Australians are failing to meet the basic dietary guidelines, especially when we're talking about vegetable intake, which we'll touch on why this one's such an important piece of that puzzle. And what we do know, and we'll go into a fair bit of detail, is around the association between the quality of people's diet and their risk of depression. So we've known for quite a long time that the two seem to be correlated, but we'll talk about a pretty cool high quality gold standard study which was implemented with a great name.
The SMILES trial.
The SMILES trial, very smart there by the researchers, showing that the actual implementation of dietary strategies actually is a form of treatment and management with this type of situations. So does poor nutrition equal depression? What we do know is that there is a link between poor quality diet and poor mood, and we know that more research is needed before we can say it causes. A small amount of poor nutrition seems to be okay. However, when we're talking high levels, that's when these associated risks and problems start to be seen. And of course, though, while we are dietitians and that's what we are going to be talking about today, it isn't the only thing to take into account, but obviously focusing on food and mood for this piece of the chat.
So as you can see from the table that we've put up on the screen here, there are a number of different medical conditions, both within our intestines and then within other areas of our body, which are related to our gut. And when we're talking food and mood, really what we're talking about is having a healthy gut and doing everything that we can to improve the health of our gut. Because as you can see from the plethora of different things that are up on the screen here, so many different medical conditions and different problems that can happen in our bodies seem to be able to be impacted by what we eat because of the influence that our gut has on our overall health. Now, I know it might sound a little bit odd that maybe our weight is something that can be impacted by what's going on in our gut, but it can, and that has been proven really well through really good quality research. I think it does make sense when we think about things like diarrhea and constipation. You know, they're something that's going on in our gut anyway. I think most of us understand that those things can happen as a result of having a less than optimized gut. However, it's not just about these more gut-centric things. It's about doing everything that we can to foster our microbiome to help influence what's going on in there because of the overall positive impact it can have on the rest of our body. So If we think about inflammation and the role that inflammation has on our body, evidence supports the role of inflammation and less inflammation or more inflammation in how different health conditions can develop. And as you saw on the previous slide, a lot of those conditions are actually influenced by inflammatory biomarkers. We know that a diet that has anti-inflammatory properties has been shown to have a huge impact on mental health, either as a preventative measure or as a method of management. Now, we're going to get a little bit sciencey with you just for a minute.
Everybody loves a fact.
Everybody loves a fact.
Some numbers.
So 12,900. So this is how many research papers there have been published specifically on gut health in the last 5 years. Now, to me, that sounds like an awful lot of research papers.
It's a lot of papers.
But then if we think about it, if we then look at all of the papers that were published on gut health in the last 40 years, this 12,900 accounts for 80% of those. So in the last 40 years, there's been not that much more, 20% more than 12,900 papers which have been published on gut health, but majority of those have been in the last 5 years. So it's a really exciting time to be working in gut health and a really exciting time to be taking that time to do everything that you can to get your gut as healthy as possible. When we break down all of the different things that are found in our gut, it's not just about the food that we've eaten, there's other living organisms that are found in there as well. And this is called our microbiome or microbiota. The different organisms are called bacteria, fungi, archaea, viruses, and even parasites are found there. And all of these different organisms play a really important role in keeping this ecosystem of different organisms functioning in its best possible way. Overall, there's around 39 trillion different microorganisms which are found in our gut. And if we try to put that into perspective, we think about all of the different stars that are up in the sky, and then if you times that by 100, that's when you reach 39 trillion. So depending on how you actually look at it, some people would say that you're only 10% human and the rest of you is actually the bacteria and other organisms that are then found in your gut. So I know when I first learned that, I was like, this is just insane. And it takes a little while to wrap your mind around this science side of things. If we take a bit of a step back though, and think instead of your gut being like a rainforest. Now, I remember learning all about the rainforest when I was at school and learning about all of the different types of plants, all of the different animals, all of the different things that were going on in a rainforest, whether it was the Daintree up in Queensland or whether it's the Amazon over in South America or one of the other amazing forests that are found all over the world. If we think about our gut in a similar way, all of the different microbes that are found in our gut play a role in maintaining a healthy balance. Now, we know that a healthy rainforest is going to thrive on diversity, and our gut is actually a little bit the same. By having a diverse array of these different microorganisms found in our gut, this helps our gut be healthier. But how do we get these different microorganisms? It is all about what we eat. And yes, it is to a degree our environment and other factors as well. But the biggest indicator is what we're putting in our mouths on a day in, day out basis. So if we take a pause for a moment and think about something called short-chain fatty acids. Now, when we eat, if we take, for example, an apple, when we eat this apple, our body digests it and it starts to break it down as soon as we start chewing on it. And then once it's chewed, it moves all the way down our digestive tract into our stomach where it gets digested further. And then it moves further down into our small intestine and then into our large intestine. Now, what then happens is the bacteria that it found in our gut, they start to ferment the different fibers which are found in this apple and in all of the other foods that we eat as well. And these bacteria then produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids. Now, when we think about things which are really good for our health, without a doubt, in my opinion, short-chain fatty acids are the absolute #1 thing that we need to improve our gut. Butyrate, propionate, and acetate are the 3 key short-chain fatty acids which are developed in our gut. And there's some really, really cool research around the role that these have. As an example, butyrate is probably the most abundant of the short-chain fatty acids. And it's been proven quite without any argument now that consumption of foods which produce butyrate and having plenty of butyrate in our gut significantly will reduce the risk of bowel cancer. So by having plenty of butyrate producing bacteria in our gut, it means that bowel cancer is something which is much less likely to happen. Interestingly, all 3 of these also play a really key role when it comes to mood and mental health. And by eating a diverse array of different foods which provide different types of fibre, these 3 short-chain fatty acids will all end up being produced. And this ends up suppressing the inflammatory microbes, which can cause a number of different health conditions that we spoke about earlier. And it can then help with restoring balance as well. So, how does our gut influence our mood? There's been a really strong correlation between our brain and our gut. So, also known as a gut brain or second brain, also known as the enteric nervous system. So our gut microbes can actually communicate with our brain, and the short-chain fatty acids that I mentioned just before can improve the health of our brain as well, because they can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. So just like short-chain fatty acids can improve the health of our gut wall, they can also improve what's going on in our mind. Now, gut microbes produce and respond to different neurohormones. So most of us have heard of serotonin, also known as the happy hormone. 90% of serotonin and 50% of dopamine is produced in our gut as a result of the different foods that we're eating and the way that the bacteria and other microbes in our gut are interacting. Intestinal serotonin is able to influence gut motility, mood, appetite, sleep, and brain function. And overall, there's more than 30 different neurotransmitters which are produced in the gut. Having a healthy gut microbiome is able to keep our mind sharp, our energy levels high, and our mood relaxed. So, enough with the really sciencey part of today's talk. I hope you've been able to bear with us over that part. I'm going to pass over to Jess, but first of all, have a think, and I'd love it if you could put this in the chat box that you'll see on your screen. And I'd love to know, how many plants have you eaten so far today? So if you count that up, maybe you had some porridge for breakfast, so that was some oats, and then maybe you put some chopped up almonds on your breakfast, and then maybe you also put some blueberries or some sliced pear or something like that. So that would be 3 plants that you then included in your breakfast today. And then maybe at lunch you had a sandwich that had some bread, so that was made from some wheat, and then you also put some lettuce, some tomato, and some carrot in your sandwich. So that all up, that's 7 different plants that you've consumed across the day. So I'd love to know where people are up to so far in the day. And yeah, we'll chat about this a little bit further on, but over to Jess.
So probably important to note there as well, as Chloe said, it's not just fruits and veggies, it's nuts and seeds and whole grains and lentils and legumes. It's anything that's grown in the ground. So when we're talking plants, we're talking anything like that. So,
and I think that's something that people often forget as well, is it's when we think of plants, a lot of people just think fruit and veggies, and it's not, it's all of the other things, the nuts.
So we've got a couple of answers there. Someone said 3.
Right.
Someone else said not enough, ... Oh, we've got 8. My favourite so far, does coffee count? Beans come out of the ground, so partial credit, I reckon. 7, 2. So there's a pretty good spread there. We're getting probably an average of 4 to 5 per participant, which is good. 6, yeah. So they're firing up. Pretty good spread.
Excellent. So yeah, it's a really interesting exercise, and obviously we'll get to the why this is so important a little bit later. But I'm going to talk for a little bit here. I love that I'm coming in on a burger slide. So Chloe's showing all the colours and I'm here with a burger. But look, when we're talking gut health, when we're talking food and mood, it's very much about what we are eating. And we're talking, like we said, these plant foods, which are going to improve and create this diversity. the important thing to note with this type of food, it's not that it then reduces it directly, but what it does is it increases the kind of proportion of these bad bacteria. So it's important to note that what we are dialing in and eating more of, depending on which category it sits in, it's simply going to influence the types of bacteria in our gut.
Couple of interesting questions. So does juice count?
It does count. As
Yeah.
long as it's made from fruit or vegetables. Or
Yes.
hopefully some veggies are in there.
We've got a vegetarian here, so 10 tracking. And what about rice?
Yep, whole grain.
Yep.
Yep.
Whole grain rice, there you go. Very good.
Yeah, so rice, so all of your grains, so your oats, your rice, all of that would be considered as a whole grain. So everyone, I love that people are doing that. So yeah, I think important just to note that it's as much as about what we are eating from that plant-based foods as well as these foods that we're trying to limit. So this is the study I mentioned at the very start. So the SMILES trial, again, I love that this is the acronym they created. So this is a gold standard trial. It is a randomized control trial. And what it looked at was a population group that had pre-existing determined mental health conditions. So this was the first of its type where it was looking at can diet be used in a treatment format and not just in a prevention. SMILE stands for supporting the modification of lifestyle in lowered emotional states. So this study had 67 participants in the end that were split into two different groups. There was 34 in the control group, and the control group was simply limited to a support arm. And then the intervention arm was the support plus dietary modification. So this trial went over a 12-week period, and those in the dietary group had the same support as the support, the control, plus an additional 7 consultations with a clinical dietitian where they had dietary intervention. And in that dietary intervention, it was heavily focused on the Mediterranean diet, which we'll talk through in the next few slides and what's comprised of that. And they had follow-up following the actual 3-month intervention and found that 6 months after the initial trial, those that were in the dietary control arm, 33%, so a third of those participants met criteria for remission of major depression. And this is compared to only 8% of that support group. So this was the first study of its kind, gold standard, where it actually showed that with the intervention of dietary modification, and an example of what the dietary modification was, say people were having ice cream or biscuits and snacks where they were encouraged to have something like Greek yogurt with walnuts and honey. These are the kind of interventional changes that were made. So that's pretty significant finding from this study. So I guess, yeah, in summary, the more people change their diets, the more their mood improves. So this is why we are here talking all of these things today. So this is a diagram representing the Mediterranean diet, and this is what we would call the ModiMed diet. So it's the modern kind of version of the Mediterranean diet. If we start down the bottom of the pyramid, so the foundations being those things that make up the biggest portion of the person's intake. And then that bottom half of the pyramid is looking at the daily intake of foods and the types of foods. And then that above the line is looking at how much would be consumed within the week. So I'll talk through a few of these things and how they might differ a little bit to our, I was just going to touch on and highlight a few differences to what you might see in comparison to, say, our own dietary guidelines. So things like whole grains, fruits and veggies, they make up the base of our own recommendations. Whole grains are quite similar to what our guidelines recommend in that 5 to 8 serves, although noting what a serve is. So, you know, if you have half a cup of cooked oats at breakfast, a slice or a sandwich or a wrap at lunch, half a cup or a cup of cooked rice, you're kind of hitting those maybe quite easily, going with those whole grain options. Fruits is actually a little bit higher, so Australian guidelines say 2 and veggies say 5, and what we know is that most Australians aren't eating enough veggies, which we touched on that first bit. So in this way of eating, they're actually encouraging you to eat more. The one I will point out, which stands out as quite different, is that olive oil actually sits as a food or a food group on its own, which is quite different, and we'll touch on extra virgin olive oil a little bit later. It is a bit of a hero food and something which we do encourage and like to incorporate because of all of its antioxidant properties and positive health benefits. But yeah, again, I won't go up the table too much, but you can see that the foundation of the types of things we want to be including on that daily basis. So thinking about the activity that Chloe just read out, and thinking about those daily recommendations that we just made, and we got you to count through your plants and what you've eaten. So how have you gone in achieving the recommended intake of foods on the coming slides? So yeah, thinking about what you've done, thinking about the information that we've just presented, and now we'll kind of move through and show you what this looks like in a representation. So our daily food foundations are the things that we should be eating every single day, and the quantities. What does that actually look like? So starting with the whole grains, you can see here we've got some examples of some bread, some oats. Again, I think from that bottom part of the pyramid, this is probably the easiest part to achieve based on how Australians would be typically eating. So it's not about not having carbohydrate foods. When we're having these whole grain based, they're actually super nutritious. They give us so much nutritional quality, B vitamins, fiber. So this is a really important nutrient when we're talking about our gut bacteria and improving the good ratios of those bacteria. So it's kind of like the fuel to our gut, if you want to think of it like that. So how Chloe was talking on the short chain fatty acids before and butyrate, these types of foods are essentially the fuel which then the bacteria eat, and then they produce those short chain fatty acids. So that's the whole grain piece. The extra virgin olive oil, we're looking at 3 tablespoons. The veggies, you can see there, we've got some examples. So we're talking half a cup of cooked veggies or a cup of raw, 3 servings of fruit, and also the 2 to 3 servings of dairy there. So again, thinking about maybe how you would typically eat, and then this is kind of what we're aiming to get closer towards for this optimal outcome. Then if we're looking at foods to include on a more of a weekly basis, so lentils and legumes, the 3 to 4 serves a week, you can see there on the plate what that might look like. We can see lean red meat. So again, it's not about not eating red meat. I mean, if you choose to eat pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan, totally fine. But if you're someone that chooses to eat red meat, then these are the kind of portions that we're looking for. One thing I know compared to a lot of the people that I often work with and see, it's significantly smaller portions. So we're talking, 65 to 100 grams, palm size type. We definitely want to look to get some fish in the diet, and in particular oily fish. So your omega-3 fatty acids are another hero nutrient when it comes to this food and mood and the relationship, and we'll touch a little bit more on that. If you don't like oily fish, other fish is fine. It's just the oily fish has the omega-3 fatty acids in greater ratios. Eggs, and also some extras. So it's not about not having your fun foods. We all have things that we like. We're human, alcohol and treats. It's just about, obviously that's not hopefully an everyday food. So that's what it all kind of looks like when we lay it out.
So how's it looking for you guys? Are you eating close to this? Is it completely different? And again, we'd really love you to drop some of your thoughts into the chat box as we're going through the next couple of slides, because we know that this way of eating is probably a little bit different to the way a lot of you guys are all eating as well.
And what this is about, it isn't about going, this is so far from how I'm eating, how my family's eating, how my students are eating, this is too hard. It's all about progress. And that's like Chloe and mine, a bit of a mantra. It's progress, not perfection. And wherever you're starting from, there's always an improvement that can be made. And it's not about going from 4 different plants a week to, we'll get to the magic number in a little bit later. I nearly gave it away there, but it's not about going from, 0 to hero. It's just about these incremental changes, which are what is actually going to help transform you literally from the inside out, from your gut bacteria out. So Matt hasn't popped on. He doesn't obviously have any other little questions, comments.
Sorry, I'm treading lightly on all the magic you're sending down the webinar. We've had a few comments, some people commenting about could definitely stand to eat less meat. And I put myself in that category as well, portion control, but certainly not doing too badly with veg. We've had a question around the debate on carbs, fruit and veg carbs, and if so, what's the overall consensus when there's conflicting feedback about, the danger of carbs? I might even let you respond to that one live if you've got
Yeah,
any.
so I mean, fruit and vegetables, fruit is a carbohydrate, and some vegetables are a carbohydrate. So your starchy vegetables like your potato, your sweet potato. In the classification of what we're talking about today, we would be looking at whole grains, fruits and veggies as separate entities. Most people, whilst we don't need to be eating excessive amounts of carbohydrates, when we're looking at those quantities that we've just said, they would total about a quarter of a meal, which really isn't a significant amount. And what we do know, the benefits of those types of foods and the macronutrients, I mean, whole grains are such an important part of fueling our gut bacteria. They are literally the types of foods that our good bacteria feast off, as well as what we get from our fruits and our vegetables as well. So look, it's not, if I'm talking practical terms, the way that I would talk to most people is if we're looking at our plate, we want to have about a quarter protein, a quarter carbohydrate coming from either your whole grains or your starchy vegetables, and then half a plate of the colourful stuff, which is the salad veggies, which there's no carbohydrate or very, very minimal in there. So the other thing to point out from a physiological point of view, our brain uses 20% of our total energy intake, and the nutrient that it uses to function is glucose. So yes, we can get technical, and it's a little bit off topic today in that, yes, you can survive without it. And if you're on a high fat, you transform into ketones. But I mean, the long-term effects of eating like that from a gut health, from a food and mood point of view on this topic is very, it can be very detrimental. So,
and I think as well, the other important thing to think about is the type of carbohydrate. So when we're talking about eating our whole grains and eating our fruit, when, you know, someone was asking about juice before, would be much more likely to recommend having a whole piece of fruit rather than drinking processed juice, and would much more likely to recommend a whole grain slice of bread rather than a piece of white bread. So the type of carbohydrates that you're consuming really matter. And if we think back to that slide with the burger, you know, some of your poorer quality carbohydrates can certainly fall into that things to eat less of. And again, you know, we're not sitting here saying to never eat those poorer quality carbohydrates, but they're not things that would be encouraging you to include on a day-to-day basis. It really is looking at those minimally processed whole grains, fruit in its whole form, as the way of incorporating the carbohydrates into your diet.
We've got a fairly eerie channeling of one of our attendees who's pretty much just said we need to eat carb, but we must choose correctly and unprocessed sources such as fruits and veggies and whole grains, and to avoid ultra-processed foods. So that's a snap between yourself and Gabrielle. What about apples and pears as daily fruit? So is there the risk of the same fruit and veggies and fruit maybe even on the sugar side?
We'll answer that in a couple of slides.
Diversity is a very important piece. So yeah, we'll
get into that in a minute. But why don't we get back to getting through some important nutrients to think about when it comes to food.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's my my closing comment on this Q&A has come from one of our attendees that, look, it's about they're doing very well with meat and dairy, eggs, olive oil and nuts, pretty good with veggies and whole grains, but recognising can do a bit more with fruit, veg, fish and legumes. So that balance, it's all about that balance and diversity.
So yeah, I guess the purpose of those last few slides was to talk about like servings and groups, but we'll definitely get to the diversity piece as well. But I won't take too long on these slides because I'm just mindful of time. But as we said, there's a few hero foods we wanted to call out in this space when we're talking food, mood, mental health. So as I said in that last slide, your omega-3 fatty acids are a really important group which we want to look to incorporate 2 to 3 times a week. So this is important for brain health. It's been shown to reduce inflammation, and that has to do with the types of fats that are in these foods. Really good sources are things like your salmon, your trout, your mackerel, sardines, walnuts, and a few different nuts and seeds there, which I won't read out. And we're aiming for 1 to 2 grams per day of EPA and DHA. So you think with your omega-3 fatty acids, there's 2 to 3 different types. Well, there's 3 different types. One is more a plant-based one, not mentioned there. And these are the ones that are really important for our brain health and reducing inflammation. B group vitamins, so we'll call these out as well. And this is why whole grains, as we said, the type of those products, those grainy breads, those brown rice, those really grainy based foods are so important because they are a real hero in this group. So our B group vitamins, so things like folate and our B12 are particularly important. And this group in particular regulate neurotransmitters, which has to do with your brain function, our immune function, and they also help in our amino acid metabolism and transfer. So the types of foods rich in these are our leafy greens, our legumes, our whole grains, and then when we're talking, well, that's our folate, and when we're talking B12, we're talking our meat-based foods, things like our fish, our eggs, our meat, our dairy, and our fortified foods. So I'm not sure if there's any vegans in this group, but that is one thing to call out with our B12 because it is predominantly in those animal-based sources. If you are vegan or not eating much of those types of foods, you will want to look to supplement because you will become deficient in that. Vitamin D, super important. The sun and sun exposure, safe sun exposure, I should say, is the best way of getting enough of this nutrient / hormone. It gets a bit of a debate on, is it a nutrient, is it a hormone? It's kind of a bit of both because of the way our body receives the sunlight, and then it has the process in which it's kind of created essentially in our body. It is essential for optimal brain function. In our food sources, we can get it from our fatty fish, our eggs, our dairy, and our fortified foods. So you can see we're kind of mentioning certain types of foods quite regularly, and they're really rich in a lot of these essential nutrients for brain function. And mushrooms, fun fact, I guess like us, we go in the sun and we get better exposure to vitamin D. If you put your mushrooms in the sun, they will actually increase their content of vitamin D. So that's pretty cool.
My favorite nutrition facts, that one.
Fun fact.
Cool. So we promised you a bit of information about diversity. So when it comes to taking care of our gut and helping to improve our mood, diversity is absolutely key. So when we're talking diversity, we're talking 30 different plants per week. So this is the magic number. Now, as we spoke about earlier, when we think of plants, it's not just our fruit and veg. It is also our legumes and lentils. It is also our whole grains. It is also our nuts, and it's our seeds as well. And I think, you know, with speaking with a lot of people, legumes and lentils, I think, is often the one that people can fall down in. And often it's because they maybe don't really know how to incorporate them into their diet, or, you know, maybe they had a bit of a bad experience with them as a kid. You know, if I had, you know, $1 for every time someone said to me, oh, I don't know how to incorporate chickpeas into my diet, you know, it's one of those things that once you know how to do it, it's really easy. But until you know how to do it, it can actually feel really challenging. I feel like you've got some questions
Matt's
now.
here.
Yeah, really good. It's topical on the last slide. Can you just outline perhaps what is a fortified food?
Yeah, sure. So it's a food that has a certain nutrient added into it, whether it's in its production or in how it's been made. So as an example, sometimes eggs end up being fortified with vitamin D or omega-3 fatty acids. This is actually to do with what the chicken that lays the egg is then fed. Bread is another really good example. So bread is often fortified with iodine, which is important for how our hormones function. And
your plant milk, so often they can be when there's a food that's replacing I don't want to say more natural version, but the example is obviously in a cow's milk. Milk calcium is a hero mineral, and the main reason, or not the main reason, but one of the main nutrients in that group. So if people don't want to drink cow's milk or aren't able to because they have a tolerance or just prefer to drink a plant-based milk, obviously that's growing in trend at the moment. A lot of companies will fortify plant-based milks with a calcium component to increase that amount. So not all of them. So it is important to read labels and do comparisons, but it can be in that instance as well.
Yeah. So sticking on the diversity bandwagon, this is the area that people do struggle with a lot. So to come back to that question on, does it matter if we just eat the same fruits and veggies? So to be honest, if you ate an apple every single day and that was the only fruit you ever ate, that would still be better than only eating one apple in the week and then eating chocolate bars the rest of the days. So eating some plants is better than eating no plants. However, the more different types of the different plants you start to incorporate into your diet, the more different types of nutrients, different types of fiber your gut microbiome is exposed to, which we know then helps to encourage a beautiful diversity of these different bacteria and other microorganisms which are found in your gut. And this has been shown to be what is the most important when it comes to optimizing our gut health. So having that diversity is the absolute key. If you're someone who, you've counted up how many plants you're having for the day, and maybe it's the ... and there hasn't been many plants in there at all yet. It's not about going, oh, well, I've got to hit 30 straight away. That's the last thing we're actually recommending. If you change it too quickly, increase the fiber too quickly, you'll probably end up uncomfortable and be like, what were those girls talking about? Yeah. I don't feel so great at all. It's about making small step-by-step changes at a time and going, okay, well, I'm currently at 0. My goal's 1. And then once you've hit 1, maybe you go, oh, you know what? I'm going to aim for 5 next week. And then once you've hit 5, maybe go, you know what? I've still not included any seeds. So I'm going to try incorporating some seeds into my diet. It's about making small step-by-step changes at a time. And to come back to what Jess was talking about, if the way of eating that she was talking about before is nowhere near what you would normally do at the moment, that's totally okay. It's not about perfect. It's about looking at where you're at and making small changes at a time to help you to get to where you want to go.
It's all about building momentum, and I guess the point of this is the awareness piece. Let's make you aware, let's make you accountable, and then also let's educate you on why it's important, but also let's show you and help you, because I feel like dietitians look very high level, this is what we shouldn't, but then it's the how. So what we'll talk to you about with our challenge is very much about the how to build momentum and get you there.
Yeah. So to give you, I guess, the newspaper edition of what we've been talking about today, by eating a large amount and a diverse array of different plants, this is the absolute #1 predictor of a healthy gut. And this is the key finding of a study called the American Gut Project. So quantity and diversity of plants is the #1 predictor of a healthy gut. And the healthier your gut, the healthier and happier your mind will be, because of the impact that these different plants has on what's going on inside your body and the impact that then has on the rest of your body.
So I guess bringing it all together and just going over everything that we've spoken about today. So I think we've shown that food very much impacts our mood. These short chain fatty acids, which we spoke about, these superheroes, I guess, in our body, they are a really high role in protecting health and in particular minimizing our risk of certain chronic conditions. We want to produce these, and these high fiber plant-based foods are the types of foods which your gut bacteria feast off, which then produce these. So that's that connection there. Our gut is our second brain, and as Chloe said, it's because the same cells are in our brain are in our gut. It's nearly like they've got a direct telephone line. They've actually got kind of 3 different ways of communicating, to be honest. They've got the vagus nerve, which is the main communicator, directly linked, and then they can nearly send direct and indirect messages to the brain through these gut microbiome, the gut microbiome, also with these hormones that are produced. So it's really, they're talking to each other constantly. Our gut microbes, as we've just said, produce and respond these neurohormones, which directly impact our mood. So as Chloe said, 90% of serotonin, our happy hormone, is actually produced in our gut. What we know is that better quality food equals better quality mood. So quantity is important, but quality as well in that diversity piece. And consistently eating 30 different plants across the week, coming from our 6 different groups of our fruits, our veg, our whole grains, our legumes, nuts and seeds, is all a really important part of this optimal health, or optimal mental health piece that we are talking to you about today.
So on that note, as Jess spoke about at the start of today's presentation was all about the what. So what is it that you need to do to change the way you're eating to help with improving your mood? We are really excited that we have put together an 8-week course, which is called the 50-Day Plant Challenge. And this is to help you to learn exactly how to incorporate the 30 different plants per week into your diet. So now you know what to do. It's all about the execution. So this is to help you to execute it and to learn how to make these changes. So we take you through the 6 plant food groups and how you can then incorporate more variety across each group as well. So maybe you are eating 1 or 2 things at least from each group, but if you could incorporate a bit more variety in that group, that's going to help improve your health further as well. We'll teach you how to make simple changes that you and your family can enjoy, how to set individual goals. And there's always also little checks the whole way through to help you to stay on track. And we have a webinar special as well. So the course fees are from $64.90 per person. And if you book before the end of September, then you can get 10% off. So this is a webinar only special for those of you who have tuned in today. So you can get in touch with Matt and Damien from Edgy Health Solutions if you would like to sign up.
But more information.
Yeah, or if you'd like some more information. But a massive, massive thank you to all of you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to Jess and I speak about gut health and how it can have such a profound impact on your mood. And yeah, thanks so much. I think, Matt, you're back. I think you've got some more questions for us.
Back in the room. Yes, well done. Thank you, Chloe and Jess. What a terrific level of content. It's nice to get some meat on the bones, pun intended, with some of this knowledge, because there's a lot of it in the media. So it's always useful. We do have a bunch of questions that have filtered through. Just before I step to that, for those of you that may have to depart on the completion of the core webinar, we will be making a recording of today's session available to those of you that attended, and we will package up the slides as well. So as an outcome of those of you that came along, we'll be in touch over the next week or so, but you can always get in touch on those contact details if you're really eager to know anything quickly. So a few questions that popped up along the way. Is there a food, I like this one, is there any food or food groups that can contribute towards a good night's sleep?
Oh, very good question.
Yes.
You went. You can do it.
We'll chime in.
We do chime in.
So there is a particular amino acid called tryptophan, which is a precursor to melatonin. So eating some, in particular dairy actually, and so again, dairy keeps popping up. You know, you hear all the negative things about dairy, but there are actually so many positives, which is what you don't hear about. So if you eat it or consume it, a glass of milk before bed, and you want to have essentially a protein-based food, so nuts, seeds, meat at dinner, in the presence of carbohydrate, which helps then the body utilize and uptake that tryptophan and convert it to the melatonin. So
to add to that, I'd say, you know, to come back to that carbohydrate question, if you haven't consumed enough carbohydrate across the day, that can actually have a negative impact on your sleep as well.
Yes.
You can end up not sleeping so well across the night, end up waking up a lot more. The other one that I like to recommend is cherries or tart cherry juice. So it again has compounds in it which help with production of melatonin, which is the hormone that helps you get to sleep. So they're another really good one.
Very good. I feel like asking about why cheese gives you weird dreams then, if that's a dairy, but maybe we'll stick to the important questions. Does polenta count as a whole grain? And what about wholemeal pasta?
Yep. Both.
Okay.
You cook the pasta so that it's al dente, so it's like not chewy, but so it's still got a bit of texture to it. It's much lower GI as well, so it means that it will digest a lot more slowly. So if you just cook it so it's just cooked, that's the best way to cook it.
Excellent. A couple of questions on dairy. Is there a good substitute for dairy? And then second to that, is soy milk good for you?
Yes, so substitutes for dairy. So if we're specifically looking at milk, so there's a variety of different plant-based milks on the diet. So soy is a really good option. There's oat milk, there's almond milk, there's rice milk. The caveat to all of those, I would say, is check if it's been fortified with calcium. Number one, most important thing. The main reason that Jess and I recommend dairy is really because of the calcium content and the important role that that plays in our bone health. The other thing is around sugar and added sugar into the plant-based milks, and a lot of them have a lot of sugar added in. So just choose this unsweetened version that's been fortified with calcium, and that's cool. Do be mindful though that most plant-based milks are significantly lower in protein than dairy-based milk as well. So it's not a straight swap. So as an example, if you're making your morning smoothie with almond milk rather than dairy milk, it might not keep you full for as long, pending what you put in it, because the protein intake, or the protein content of that, I should say, is so much lower.
So the best option there, I guess, when we're talking about that would be a soy. The soy would be a lot higher in that protein than the other plant milks. Yeah, it's much of the muchness.
And if we're looking at yogurt, you know, plant-based alternatives for yogurt, none of them are the same as dairy, to be honest. I know we're sounding like very pro-dairy, and we obviously both like recommending dairy.
You can choose, you drink, you know, mainly soy milk.
I don't drink cow's milk. I have soy milk or oat milk. But from a plant-based yogurt, as an example, coconut yogurt is one that a lot of people use, but it's just fat. It's nothing similar to like a Greek yogurt or a natural yogurt. So the health benefits are just not there. Sorry.
Can you eat too much fibre?
Yes.
You can, definitely.
And you'll know about it. Your body will let you know. So I guess to Chloe's point as well, it's not about no veggies to 6 serves a day, because that's going to be a really big shock to your system, even from every single level. So your profile of your gut bacteria at the moment is probably going to not be where it needs to be. So in that digestion piece, and also just aside from that, introducing that amount of fibre. When we're talking about producing short chain fatty acids and butyrate and that process is actually a gas producing process. And depending on what that threshold is, those symptoms can kind of be, you know, manageable and all going on. And then above a threshold to what your normal is, then you all know about it. So
if you increase it too quickly, what Jess is trying to say, it might be a little bit embarrassing in the classroom for a couple of days. So you want to increase it slowly, because otherwise you need to give your body time, your gut bacteria time to change,
to adjust and learn how to metabolize it and break it down and utilize it. So
is there a preferred way to cook vegetables, or does anything count?
We talk about this in the challenge. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. So roasting and baking it with the extra virgin olive oil can be a really good way, because it can actually activate some nutrients or better absorb. So you better absorb your fat soluble vitamins. Steaming it, pretty much most ways are good, just not necessarily boiling it. So the boiling it will leach out some of the water soluble vitamins. And unless you're consuming the water like in a soup or something, then we lose that. So baking, roasting, steaming, all great.
Or eating raw as well. Do it, and if you do a mix of different ways as well. So as an example, like just cooked broccoli versus well-cooked broccoli, they have different nutrient profiles because of your ability to absorb nutrients from them. Mushrooms are the same, raw mushrooms versus cooked mushrooms. And there's a number of other veggies which are similar to that too.
Mixing it up is great. I think, you know, roasting and baking vegetables in combination with a salad, delicious, nutritious, and like Chloe said, it kind of, and I said it, you're getting a win from different nutrient profiles and roles. We do talk about that in the challenge.
Tell us about the hype on fermented foods. Is it legit?
The hype on fermented foods. So it depends on what food you're looking at. So fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, and kefir. So kimchi and sauerkraut are fermented vegetables where lactobacillus are formed, and kefir is a sort of a halfway between milk and yogurt. It's a fermented milk drink. Those have all been shown to have some really wonderful health benefits. We're looking at something like kombucha, which is probably gets a lot of the airtime. There's a lot less research around the health benefits of consuming kombucha. So like, I do recommend kombucha because it's a much better alternative than going and having a soft drink or a sugar sweetened, a sugar sweetened beverage of some description. But otherwise, there's actually not a lot of research around kombucha. Sourdough bread's another good one. So it's produced, and there's a lot more fermentation that goes on with the true sourdough than there is from other types of bread. So again, some really great health benefits seen from that. So yes, but not always.
There was a question earlier on around some of the study samples. Specifically, we referenced something around a sample size of around 67 participants. Can you tell us, is that a little bit small based on good results, or what's the participation on some of that research data like?
Yeah, like the SMILE study, so they, given the quality of that study being randomized controlled trial, gold standard, I mean, it's not like we can't go and change the world and make recommendations that if you eat like this, it will treat depression and mental health disorders. But it is a very good indication that there is something here when we look at that comparison of a third of people going into remission of depressive symptoms compared to 8%. So it's not saying, yes, every single person needs to eat like this and this will happen. What it is saying, there is something here, we need to investigate it further.
And there's been a number of other studies, I couldn't tell you the numbers in them, that have been done both before and after that SMILES trial as well. So yes, like we reference the SMILES trial purely because of how great a study it was. But there's been a number of other studies that have been done which support the findings of.
Okay, excellent. Well, look, basically, we've smashed all the major questions, and I think you have both provided an absolute wealth of fantastic information. So Chloe and Jess, on behalf of Damien and I, thank you so much for bringing along all this knowledge today. We've had a number of comments about thank yous, and someone's off to get cherry juice now. So, so there's some cool stuff going on. For those of you that are still here, we will be in touch just to follow up with the slides, as I mentioned. If you would like to put this towards your professional development, just let us know when we get in touch, and we'll provide you with a certificate of attendance just to put towards your PD. Thank you so much, everyone, for finding time out of today, and thank you again, Chloe and Jess from H&P Collective.
Thanks so much for having us, Matt and Damien, and thanks to everyone for spending your Thursday afternoon with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for your great questions and interaction as well.
It's really great.
Really great.
Awesome. All right, thanks very much. There's thank yous aplenty. I won't read them all, but they're all saying very much awesome work. Really, really cool. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.